You're like a pro at stuff now, man.
Yeah, because I do have another podcast going on different topics called the Pulling the Threads podcast. So I interview doctors and professors and stuff in
Hmm.
ancient history, textual criticism. So yeah, I've had a podcast like not even related to martial arts going on for a while.
Yeah, somebody on Facebook was mentioned something about that, and I thought to myself, all the incessant, what I call backing and forthing, right,
Uh,
between that we sometimes get involved in. I think some people seem to believe that all JKD people are interested in and all they know about
it's JKD,
is JKD. And that is the dumbest thing. That
right?
is the dumbest premise. The other dumb premise that I think people who indulge in this are trying to appear superior is the
Yeah,
whole shut up and train.
yeah,
Like, if you and I spend a few minutes on Facebook, do they think that that's the entire day?
right?
Right? Don't they realize that we're going to be out there training and teaching
Yeah.
more time than we're spending on Facebook? So I don't get this thing about, oh, you guys spend so much time on Facebook when you should be this. I think it's dumb. It's
I mean,
really dumb.
it's a way of minimizing what people are saying. It's trying to reduce things down, and basically discredit what somebody's saying. Oh, you should be
Mhm.
training. Okay, well, why aren't you training? You're making comments on here too. So I mean, yeah, go train. Why don't you? So
Exactly.
yeah.
Right. Hey, I just realized that we almost look like twins with
Oh
our
yeah,
logos, man. Check that out.
the
Right.
black and white day.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I always used to say that at the Inasano Academy, when you had the instructor conferences, you should
Hmm.
let everybody wear their uniform shirt,
Hmm.
right? Because then you could have a discussion amongst the different people about, well, how come you're using this, and what was the idea behind that design and what
Yeah,
have you, you
yeah.
know? All right. So for those of you who are logging in to our warm-up conversation, this is the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues episode number 301 with Jeremiah Giehl, who is making his second appearance, I think, on the program. And up until a few months ago, we had never actually met in person. But then when Ron Reagan and I and Glenn and Bill from my Miami group were out in LA, we went to dinner with you and Glenn and Christine,
Yeah,
right?
down
Yeah,
down in Chinatown, not far from the Bruce Lee statue.
right. Yeah. So actually, after you left, and then we were walking back to the cars, that we had that brilliant idea, and so we walked over there
Yeah,
and took some shots and what have you. Yeah, I had never done that
yeah,
touristy stuff.
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry I had to cut short because I was running out on a hot date. So I got to see y'all for a bit, and then I was like, I got things
Hey
I gotta
man,
do.
even a JKD man's got to have his priorities. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah.
So yeah. So I did put in the preview postcard that we were going to have a conversation about mental health and what have you. And I am no expert. I
Mhm.
think you're way more versed in this topic than I am. But I did want to ask you about this because it is my observation that in the past few years in the media, it seems that they use that phrase mental health a lot more than I seem to remember them doing that. Is that an accurate perception?
You're saying that they focus about mental health awareness more in
Yeah,
the
I
media?
I hear I hear people. So, for example, back in one thing I remembered was in the Olympics when the little girl, I forget her name now, but the little girl, I think she withdrew from the competition or something
Yeah.
over a case of the twisties or whatever that was. And so
Yeah.
then there was this whole thing in the follow-up. All the media reports were about the importance of mental health and this, and you hear it like over and over again when they're the unfortunate, the mass shootings and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about it. So, I mean, is this, obviously it's not something new,
Yeah.
but what is there? I mean, has there been a movement to make the population at large more aware of these things?
So I think it's really an effort to destigmatize mental health issues,
Mhm.
um, because if you look at the older generations, people born 70 and before, I would say, you grew up in an environment that we grew up in an environment that was a lot tougher than kids these days. Kids nowadays, they're in anti-bullying spaces. Like we had to deal with physical violence versus nowadays you can barely say something to somebody in person or online without it becoming bullying. So
Right.
there's been a change in mental health awareness, but also because of, and I don't know, I think the stuff we went through made us more resilient, made us more stronger. It didn't
Mhm.
necessarily make us weaker. So this oversensitivity, I feel, has actually weakened people. But in a culture where people are conditioned in school and everything in a much softer environment, um, the people who have trauma and things are more exposed, and dealing with stigmas prevents people from getting access to care. And, the stigmas make them afraid to tell people or talk about it and stuff. So I believe that in general, there's been, I don't know, I'd say it was decentralized. I don't think it was a central movement, but for people to advocate for talking about mental health issues, removing the stigma about mental health issues, um, so that people wouldn't be afraid to talk about it or access care.
Right.
And with social media, you have access to more communication, more words in front of your face on a regular basis. In the past, you had to talk to a person and engage in conversation. And historically, guys talk less, women talk more. On a daily basis, we didn't encounter as many words as we do now. uh, Now on social media, you're reading, you're reading a couple newspapers a day. So it's access of information, and then those advocating for healthy, safe spaces. And there is a amount of that awareness in safe spaces we need. But I also think adversity breeds strength. Humans are very resilient people, and being overly sensitive does in ways prevent people from the resiliency that comes through things. I mean, to talk about just a simple thing, medication and stuff. Um, Letting your kid play in the dirt, get exposed to dirt, and his immune system fighting the things from being exposed to dirt is good for his immune system. You
Right.
keep him in a safe environment and he's not exposed to that. Well, now you've got to start doing a bunch of vaccines because his body isn't fighting the things it needs to. So adversity isn't a necessarily bad thing in itself. I mean, trauma, very, like things that lead to post-traumatic stress disorder and stuff. That stuff is definitely stuff that we need to mitigate, manage, and deal with. But
Mhm.
adversity isn't a bad thing, that, and in my, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I probably have expertise from the amount of years that I have sought to proactively manage my mental health, being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, panic attacks from trauma and stuff that violent trauma that I experienced. It wasn't the sexy trauma. It wasn't like you said, you tell somebody you have PTSD, oh, you were a soldier, you fought in the war. I'm like, no, I didn't. Sorry. It's not the cool PTSD. And apparently, like, oh, you got it in the war, you're a soldier. I'm like,
Yeah.
no. And they're just kind of disappointed. And I'm like, well, unfortunately, it was, violence from my father, like gang violence I experienced growing up that caused me to have PTSD. It wasn't the cool PTSD.
Right.
Apparently, if you're a soldier, you're the cool kids with PTSD. Even though
Yep.
I think if you have PTSD, you don't feel like it's cool at all. But you know, um, I think it's a good thing that people are aware of mental health and communicated about it. And, that's kind of why I suggested the idea of this is just to make awareness about it, make sure that our spaces are safe.
Mhm.
I think martial arts in general is aspirational. So it is good for people I mean, I constantly encounter people who are like, I was traumatized, I was mugged, I had this happen. and they're coming to regain confidence in their life.
Right.
Right. So martial arts is very aspirational. Movies like The Karate Kid, where, he's getting bullied, he trains under, his instructor, and then he learns how to have confidence and stand up for himself. Um, Actually, this is the beauty of martial arts, is that through physical activity, and one of the things, the myths I'd like to dispel that I regularly run into to people who don't practice martial arts, is people who do martial arts tend to be a lot calmer people than people who do not. I have people who are like, "Oh, you do martial arts? Oh, so you're violent?" I'm like, "No, actually, I felt like when I was growing up, being grown up in the hood and gang violence, you feel like you have to respond to violence with violence. But when I started learning martial arts, I had confidence and I realized I no longer had to.
Yeah.
So violence became less of an option and something I sought to avoid, because now I know how to handle myself. I don't need to beat you up because you're talking smack to me. I can actually de-escalate, use, my verbal de-escalation skills. I can try to talk you out, because what's the point of fighting anyways? I don't want to be in altercation, and hopefully the other person doesn't, but sometimes you run into people that do. So I
Yeah.
think, martial arts is very it's a good tool that a lot of people come to because they want confidence in their life, whether it be trauma, bullying. Some people just do it for the sports aspects of it. But yeah, I don't know if I got too off on a tangent there.
No, I'm wondering though, like you say, so a lot of people will come to martial art because they want to improve confidence and what have you.
Mhm.
What is the magic then behind that? That now they start learning kicking and punching, and all of a sudden they feel better. See, to me, in my uneducated um, status about the situation, it seems to me that
Mm.
it was all in their mind, and now their minds are focused elsewhere, or the physical activity has refocused their minds. So I'm not trying to diminish anything, but is it possible that in some instances it was really just in their mind and they just need to rewire the way they thought about themselves?
Um, how do I say this? I mean, there's a both and, like, yes and no.
Mhm.
Um, well, one, physical activity releases endorphins. So, if you're dealing with a stress episode, like you have anxiety or panic attacks, going for a walk, going for a run, doing exercise, it releases endorphins in your body. Um, it stimulates the neurotransmitters in your brain. So, the endorphins are the feel good emotions. So doing martial arts can help you in emotional regulation by releasing, because it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. You have trauma that triggers changes in the way we process things in our brain, and it leads to uh, microgenetic changes. It doesn't lead to it's not going to change your genes. It's on a micro level that it impacts your genetics. On epigenetics is what they talk about. Epigenetics. Epigenetics is how life experiences changes the way we process things chemically in our body. They've done studies of twins. You have two twins who, identical twins. They grew up together. They can finish each other's sentences. They're very similar in a lot of things, but they've studied their genome, and over their life, the epigenetics of two twins starts to diverge to where it's almost like two strangers epigenetics in their genetics. So life experience can impact the way that our bodies release and process chemicals. And so that's why, like, sometimes when somebody's emotional regulation is really bad, they provide a medication to balance out the imbalance in their neurotransmitters and the chemicals, because they're shock produces too much dopamine. Dopamine is where we get the idea of dope, like drugs, crack. So when you're having a severe panic attack, the fight or flight syndrome, um, and you also release cortisol into your body. Cortisol congeals in your belly. Is that really hard fat that's hard to get rid of? Not the beer, not to be confused with like a beer belly or somebody eating a lot of sugar, but the stress belly. It's the really hard fat. So your body in stress produces chemicals because your brain's telling your body, the subconsciously fight or flight, whatever your response to trauma is. So um, some of it is, and I do believe in the cognitive emotive theory that thoughts lead to emotions, lead to action. And if you change the way you think, you change the way you feel, it changes the way you act. So, yes, on one level, martial arts can help somebody release endorphins that make them feel good. On another level, it can rewire their lack of confidence by exposure therapy. So, like if you remember the movie Red Belt, I don't know if you saw that one. A lady experiences trauma. She comes to start training, and she's exposed to the act that was done to her, and then over a time learns confidence to how overcome that. So martial arts can provide exposure therapy where you're exposed to the very violence you experienced and learn how to overcome it, and in a way have emotional release, which is something that I work with people sometimes when they come for trauma. Is we'll give them skills, but then I'll also take them through like what, when they come specifically, like I had this assault, what would you do in this situation? How do I handle this in the future? I give them skills, and then we work through that situation. And when they're comfortable, you put them in the situation and teach them how to fight out. So next time, if they're in that situation, but what it does is it gives a bit of emotional release and confidence where like, okay, one, I can avoid it. And two, if it happens again, this is what I would do. And I feel like it is a bit of retraining the mind because you're giving them the confidence to say, okay, I've experienced this trauma, but the beautiful thing about it is they're learning to overcome it. They're tackling it head on. They're not, running from it. And this is why I say adversity isn't a bad thing. We're not going to avoid adversity, but as humans, we're very resilient. I mean, I think from, you know, however you believe we came to be, whether evolution or creation, there is still microevolution, changes that have happened over, because of the survival of the fittest. Um, we've adapted to a lot of things through the environment around us, and humans are very we're it's a beautiful thing that we adapt to things. So um I think the beauty of martial arts is the ability to help people adapt and find that strength, that resilience, to fight through the trauma. Like I like helping people work through it and get to the point where it no longer controls them, they control themselves. Because the problem of trauma is when it controls a person, then because they're afraid to do things, because exposure to things triggers panic attacks and stuff like that. And so a lot of my experience is I feel like I've become successful in overcoming and conquering PTSD and panic attacks through strategies I've learned over a long period of time, years of counseling, support groups. I've had to be on medication, but getting to a point through mindfulness, good mental health practices, physical activity, and diet. Food is medicine. Diet, being able to get to a point where I don't have any signs of symptoms of PTSD. I don't have severe panic attacks, and I did it doing mindfulness, breath control, diet, exercise, and intentionally socializing. After one of the worst periods in my life, my ex committed parent-child abduction. She intentionally did things that led to the car get impounded, took my check for like 2.5 months, and I was facing eviction, and I had to pick myself up from scratch and work through all this stuff. During that time is when I worked with my counselor to come off the medication for depression and anxiety. And I learned that physical activity, going for walks and things like that, release endorphins, mindfulness and a lot of things. And I took my life back to a way that I feel great. It feels good uh, to be in charge and not need those kind of things. So I feel like I like to try to pass on things, to other people. And that's kind of why I want to bring awareness to it. Is it's something people struggle with, but martial arts is one avenue that we can aid people on a journey of recovery.
Mhm.
So
So tell me about the commonalities, and then if there are specific differences, because you work with all ages, right?
not currently. I have run after school programs, and I
Mhm.
used to teach kids martial arts. Currently, I teach a primarily adult program.
Okay.
So I'm not currently. I have, but I also teach adaptive martial arts, which I find rewarding. Um, it's sad
What
because
okay, so two things then. Break down adaptive martial arts for me, and then if you can recall, were there commonalities or specific differences when you were working with kids and in the way that you work with adults?
I'll start with the second one. There are commonalities between kids and adults, but differences. Um, because with kids, well, one, I did a lot of traditional martial arts when I taught kids.
Uh-huh.
Because one of the kid, well, so the structure of traditional martial arts is really good for kids with ADHD and emotional regulation issues because the structure and the discipline is really good for focusing them for 30 minutes to an hour, and that kind of discipline I've seen successfully help turn kids who were angry or had out of control like ADHD. That physical activities have brought them down and balanced them. And as long as they practiced that, they actually did better managing their ADHD and emotional deregulation. So, because and I've taught PE, which I was technically teaching Taekwondo and Krav Maga for as the PE coach. And I've done after school programs and kids martial arts. And so, um, really, there's a lot of parents that they'd be like, my kid has ADHD, he has emotional deregulation, and I think the discipline would be good for him. And I saw a lot of success with that. So, now there's similarities, but it's different with adults, especially the ones who come because they've been mugged. Um, which also kind of takes me into the adaptive martial arts. One of the guys I teach that's in a wheelchair, and I find this so unfortunate. He was assaulted in his wheelchair by a couple of his friends, pull him out of his wheelchair and beat him up. Um, one, like, what is wrong with people that they are assaulting somebody in a wheelchair? I mean, like, boggles the mind. But another like other adults who come to me because of I was talking to somebody today who is going to start training with me because she experienced an assault, and there's other people I've been training with. Um, in general, it's a little different with people who've experienced assault. One, they want to learn skills, very practical skills that will end a fight and avoid a fight immediately. And so the way I approach adults with trauma is definitely different than kids. Um, I find them both fulfilling. I haven't done like teaching kids martial arts since my kids went to Texas. My son was an assistant instructor. He was a big part of that. So I didn't feel like continuing to do kids martial arts. I've focused on adults as, uh, just it's easier not to run a daycare. But there is money in running a daycare.
Right.
The parents, and I found this to be true, parents will throw a lot of money at their kids, especially if they have ADHD, emotional deregulation, and they want their kid to have some. They'll sign up for a 2 to 3 year program to get them to their black belt or their master's program.
Yeah.
And they'll do it, and they will make their kid come. So you have money and students if you want to do it. But when you have kids like that, it can be challenging to manage the class.
Does that have to be, because you mentioned traditional arts providing like almost automatically that discipline.
Yeah.
So then if you're a Jeet Kune Do instructor,
I was sneaky about it. So I had like one of the schools I worked with that I ran.
I didn't even have to finish asking the question.
Oh my God! I had to be sneaky because I taught Cali, and I slipped in Jeet Kune Do and Krav Maga, but I was very specifically tasked no kid on kid combat, and they don't understand how you teach it and what you do. So I had limitations. Definitely when you work for a school, if you teach a martial art program at your own facility offsite, that's fine. But when you're teaching at the school and they're hosting it, they become very specific. So it was the hoops I had to go through to teach Kali. I had to do pool noodles and call them lightsabers, and I was doing Jedi training. So it worked. But as long as it was a pool noodle and they're Jedis, I could teach kids to hit each other with sticks.
Right.
but
I love it.
and then I do the short one for a knife, but we wouldn't call a knife, of course. It's just a small lightsaber. So I was sneaky. But well, still, when it comes to parents seeking for emotional stability, I because of standard attention, you follow commands in that structured time frame. I felt like that was really good for them. And the less structured, like if you're doing just a regular class, and it doesn't have that focus, BJJ, Muay Thai, Jeet Kune Do, those kind of arts, they're perfectly fine. I just find you have to be very disciplined and structured, which is not really something we're great at in this Jeet Kune Do. We don't really usually have a highly, disciplined, structured thing. It's kind of not built that way. So when I'm teaching those kind of mental skills, I'm going to default on something traditional, military based, because it has standard attention, respect, and all that kind of stuff. And then I was sneaky. I sneak stuff in, but I tried to follow the format.
Right.
The requests were hilarious, and you're like, do you know what I do? But so now adaptive martial arts. What was the question on that? Because I answered the second one first.
Right. Well, but so you brought up the phrase, and I just wanted you to give me a breakdown, an explanation of what's meant by adaptive martial arts.
Okay, yeah. Adaptive martial arts are people who are differently abled, because that's how we term it now. But people who, there used to be terms that are very derogative, but people with developmental disabilities. I mean, we say developmental, differently abled, but people who are wheelchair bound, people with cerebral palsy, people who don't function like us, people who have learning disabilities, um, you know, people, I had a uncle who had cerebral palsy, um, and like he never progressed past like a 5 to 8 year old mentality, like the mindset. So people who have those kind of challenges, how do we adapt martial arts and help them, one, defend themselves, build confidence? You've got to adapt so adaptive martial arts, you have to adapt it to their physicality. I mean, we say in Jeet Kune Do that it's an art of self-expression, and that we're trying to develop the individual's Jeet Kune Do. So to whatever adapt, you have short, tall, skinny, fast, slow, whatever your skill set is, we're going to adapt it. Adaptive martial arts is just more specifically to people who are wheelchair bound, walker bound, or have various developmental disabilities. And I've done that since the 90s off and on. I find that it's empowering to help people. And unfortunate, I've heard too many stories of developmental, differently abled people experience violence from people who are not, like, I don't understand why a person would attack a person with mental or physical disabilities. It's just very unfortunate. But yeah, so that's something I do enjoy doing, and I like helping people in that aspect. Yeah.
What let's go back to the kids, because I wanted to ask you about this. How important is the involvement of the parents? Because you said you can make money at a daycare, and usually at the daycare they just drop the kids off, and then you don't see them until it's pickup time.
I said that on purpose because when you have developmental, or when you have like ADHD and emotional deregulation issues, it's a environmental thing. Some of it can be, chemical imbalances passed down genetically, but I find a lot of that there's some physical, emotional, or verbal violence going on in the family. and they've learned these behaviors from somebody they have regular interaction with, whether a parent or an uncle or something like that. So, the family support would be great, but some families, they want to drop their kids off. You fix them in 30 minutes to an hour and then pick them up, and they don't alter the way that they live. So that's why I call it a daycare. Because not always, because sometimes
Right.
you have the very involved, supported parents who, you know, the type of parents that give their kids homework when they don't have homework, and they're very involved in the kids' lives, and this is just an additional thing along with the other sports that they got their kids enrolled in and stuff. The multiple activity parents, um, but the ones that I've seen where they and the ones who are dropped off and their parents want to pick them up and they want you to fix them. There are a few of those where you could tell there was stuff going on that a supportive home environment would have made the situation better for them.
Right.
And so, yes, parent involvement is one. What you want done in the martial arts for them, structure, discipline, you have to provide some of that yourself if you want it to be something. But that's also why they'll sign up for it too.
Did you instruct the parents on that?
I would always encourage them. I would always at least say, parental involvement is important. I would encourage them, because we do Taekwondo forms and stuff like that. I'd encourage them to work on the forms with them, or the self-defense or one steps, or, but I would also just encourage them to, be involved in, try to provide support, in their own personal life. I didn't get too personal though. I didn't, because I'm not a counselor and I'm not being asked a question. So I didn't offer, like, if maybe you were a little more disciplined with your child, if you provided a little more structure with your child, you would not need me. I wasn't that direct.
Yeah.
Because then you offend the people who pay you.
Well, what if you were a consultant for martial arts schools, for professional martial arts schools?
Like, what would I consult them to do?
Yeah, and you did get the question on, well, what is the value or the importance of parental involvement, and what percentage, like how far should parents go in being involved?
Well, I would say that if you're a non-disciplinary parent that doesn't provide serious discipline or structure for your children, because there's these parents nowadays that eschew discipline, and you don't have to. I mean, there are plenty of ways to discipline that don't include like the old way where people got spanked. You can rewards and consequences, but if you want your child to be disciplined and have structure, you should try to provide some of that at home. As far as advising schools when it comes to doing it, I would make sure every class, beginning and end of class around drop-off time, when you're doing announcements or introductions, that you're encouraging parental involvement. Make comments about, if if you like, how this is impacting your kid positively. Make sure that you're supporting it with similar behaviors at home. Try to be involved with their training, help them get ready for testing. But you want to try to create it. And if you have parent time, like where they're, doing their signing up for a new contract, or like monthly meeting with them, just because if sometimes, like, if a kid's grades get bad, you're like, you can't train until you get your grades up. So you want them to, sometimes you'll have them give you their progress reports from school to make sure that they're getting, decent grades. If you're trying to encourage that kind of environment. So like when they're doing that, you might encourage the parent, like, just, make sure you're supporting them at home with the things that you see working here. You might want to implement some of the strategies at home where there's a little more, discipline and structure, if you feel like that's beneficial.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to be careful how you say those things, because you don't want to offend people, or just say, I don't think you're parenting well. It's like that wouldn't go over very well at all. I mean, if I'm taking my kids to martial arts and the guy's like, yeah, you're not parenting well, you need to do better at home, like, yeah, I'm not coming back. You don't get my money. Like, no. So,
So like you were talking about the automaticity of when you tell people you're a martial artist, they're like, oh, you're violent, right? The other thing that I find automatic is that when people hear that you teach martial art, it's like, oh, I want to put my kid in,
yeah.
right? It's almost automatic that they think it's about kids. And you just talked about strategies for for parents and dealing with kids and what have you. What are strategies for adults who now they have to go home and practice on themselves, right? So what? How does that work? What are the strategies then that are recommended for adults to follow through on what they're being taught at class, right?
Well, this is also where I like Jeet Kune Do because it's a philosophical martial art, and you can quote, philosophical things from Bruce Lee. Well, there's a couple things. Well, I kind of want to broaden it. How do you support people with martial arts, mental health? And I think it can be broadly. I mean, encouraging them to practice it at home, but we want to give them tools they can use. So we give, I end every class with mindfulness, a little breath control thing. So one, encouraging mindfulness. And one of the things, and I wanted to bring this up, so I'll bring it up now. So they did studies on Marines and Navy SEALs that practice mindfulness or breath control. For the SEALs, they did this practice called box breathing, where it's you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and then you repeat. And you're doing this breath control thing. And they've done studies that, one, if you do like mindfulness, meditation, breath control, that it reduces the amount of soldiers who experience PTSD. It increases recovery time. And they're more calmer and able to operate better under pressure. So doing mindfulness, breath control is very important. Like one of the things that I saw that Bruce Lee, and it also works with speed. One of the things that I saw Bruce Lee was working on near the end of his life was relaxing more, because the more relaxed you are, the faster you are, because speed times mass is power. So the faster that I move, the harder that I hit, versus, pushing with a more anaerobic motion. When I muscle it out, it's not as strong as when I relax and whip it out. So mindfulness can do a few things. One, help you relax, help you be faster as a martial artist, but also help you recover and survive through trauma better. So mindfulness has been proven to help soldiers, and thus anybody who experiences trauma. And a topic I kind of want to touch on that I want to get into is not just the trauma of war or the trauma of violence, but the trauma of professional fighters and people who've had a lot of street fights. And I've had enough experience in this to speak from experience that all fighters experience a level of PTSD. Whether you're experiencing TBI, traumatic brain injury from impact, even Kali, when you have helmets on and gloves and you're doing full contact Kali, even with the helmet on, you're not having superficial damage to bones and skin, but the impact to your helmet still can cause rattling of the brain and TBI. So it is better because I've done full contact Kali, to have the helmet on, because SIAC guys, when they go full contact without pads, like, that's brain damage right there. But you still get, every time you get hit in the helmet and it rattles your helmet, that's potential TBI right there. If you're doing full contact and taking hits to the head, I did some no holds bar stuff, that's like bare knuckle stuff. And then a lot of street fights, working as a bouncer. I mean, every one of those is a traumatic experience, and you go into the fight or flight. Your adrenaline is pumping. And the more that fighters of any kind, whether it's a soldier, professional fighter, street fighter, they get to a level where they have PTSD. And if you notice, and this is one thing that I've noticed, ways we can make our spaces a little healthier is that people who have experienced a lot of violence and trauma sometimes come out in their teaching styles. I working with traditional martial artists, I haven't seen it as much, but because people who do it recreationally don't have that trauma.
Right.
But people who are either MMA fighters or street fighters, that trauma sometimes affects their interpersonal relationships and makes things a little challenging. So ways we can
Let,
support
let
that.
me let me ask you a masked question here. Is that why you were attracted to certain people as an instructor?
So in a way, yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
that's kind of true. And they say, like, people who have, had physically violent fathers, people who've had a lot of fight experience. Uh, and there's being a bouncer, there's a certain amount of threat and danger that also you become acclimated to, and when it's not present, you kind of miss it. Uh, so like
That
I recently stopped being a bouncer for a more softer security job, but I've noticed lately I've been missing the sense of adventure and dealing with altercations on a consistent basis. So I kind of miss it. But living in a heightened fight or flight syndrome releases histamine in your body, which increases allergies. So living in an environment like that, you're dealing with high dopamine levels, cortisol dump, and elevated histamine. So uh, people with prolonged exposure to trauma will start having increased allergy symptoms, increased asthma symptoms. Like, I didn't have asthma as a kid. I developed
right.
asthma as an adult. When I wasn't managing the PTSD in my life, my asthma and allergies was out of control. Once I got on this program where I'm managing eat, I changed the way I eat, that food is medicine, and I don't eat inflammatory foods, things that cause inflammation and pain, and then added mindfulness and physical activities. I was able to like reduce all that stuff to where like I don't really deal with that stuff on that level anymore. But I went from having high allergy, high asthma to like I can train for 6 to 8 hours and I'm still going. Um, so, I feel like, is there a mental aspect? Yes. But there are also physical things that you need to do to kind of retrain your body and change the chemicals. Because when you're exposed to too much of any chemicals, it's going to change the way you react to things. And when you have a heightened alert people who've had a lot of trauma, they're going to overreact to things. They're going to be quick to yell, quick to be explosive, quick to result in violence, even when the situation doesn't call for it. And so, like, I've had a couple experiences with mentors I looked up to where I would say fighters, their trauma bleeded over into interpersonal interactions. It was
Right.
challenging.
Yeah.
But as a person, like, I'm never going to talk bad about people or out people or anything like that. But I need to know how to manage it myself and create safe places for people. And people with trauma, we need to provide them, fighters on any level, whether it's a soldier, trauma survivor, street fighter, MMA fighter.
Mhm.
We need to provide spaces where we encourage things. Like, I talk about mindfulness, diet, and exercise. That's part of regularly what I talk about. We end with a little breath control thing. I try to at least incorporate where I talk about these methods to manage and control, and also I regularly talk about the legalities of combat, because knowing use of force escalation, understanding I meet force with proper force. I don't use excessive force. I don't use lethal force unless lethal force is presented. Um, but also teaching de-escalation to avoid conflict. Like, I hone these points in regularly. Like, I'm talking about how to avoid fights, how to de-escalate. If you have skills, you should seek to avoid it rather than engage in it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like if we're going to create spaces that provide fighters who want to train and they want to find the peace from training, they want to pass that on to people with trauma. We want to create spaces that we encourage things like proper diet, You know, if we eat foods that create inflammation, things that create mucus, it causes inflammation and pain in your body, which exacerbates things like anxiety, allergies, and asthma. If anybody's listening and they deal with a lot of anxiety, allergies, asthma, look at an anti-inflammatory diet. Remove foods, essentially what's on a pizza, breads, um, dairy, and stuff like tomato paste. They create inflammation in your body. So I would reduce or eliminate as much as you can. And eat clean foods. Meats, fruits, and vegetables. Avoid processed food. Avoid deep fried foods. And you will notice a difference in mental clarity, focus, and you will feel good. And if you add in, the physical activity component, and if you're dealing with pain, add stretching. Stretching is important in addition. The stretching and physical activity and these things, you'll notice the quality of life changes for the better. So, if we can pass these skills, Bruce Lee was into vitamins and diet and exercise and stuff. So if we can include passing on these things as part of, what Bruce Lee did, when people come to us, because the fanboys are like, I want to learn Jeet Kune Do because Bruce Lee, because people come for the different reasons. But when they come for that reason, you can couch it in, Bruce Lee was into diet and exercise and,
Right.
meditation and stuff. And so I'm going to pass this tradition to you, and then we can throw in the philosophy and where I use it to, seep in, good mental health skills. We have a pretty good, and I feel like Jeet Kune Do is unique, and we have a really good skill set based on, the philosophical works that Bruce Lee has given us, that we can actually pass some tools from our tradition that lead to a healthy lifestyle.
So why
You
aren't
know,
there more successful Jeet Kune Do schools?
oh, bro. Oh, fanboys. There's a lot of like I don't know, iconograph. I don't know, like idol worship,
Mhm.
um, and sectarianism. Which how does Jeet Kune Do have sectarianism when like Bruce Lee was very not sectarian when it comes to like how do you have these divisive groups in a thing that literally the founder was against that? But
Right.
yeah. Um, I mean, well, many reasons. Probably goes back to one, Bruce Lee was cut off early and he wasn't finished with the project he was working on. We could say he was at a good place and he had some good stuff, but I think he would have developed it more had he still lived.
Mhm.
Um, and I would chalk it up to the interpersonal conflicts between the surviving students. A lot of students who were, students of Sifu Dan, after Bruce Lee's death, made them instructors, then had conflict with his way of doing things, is one of them. But, all that
Yeah.
stuff, we just never had there were different people vying for power, and nobody ever just got to the point of we should have just formalized a less ideological and more open central organization that allowed for diversity of expression and opinion
Right.
and tried to pass on what you learned versus saying what I learned is fact and what you learned is not. It should have been like, okay, this is what I learned. I'm passing on. Now you pass on what you learned, and let's all share what we learned.
Yeah.
If ego, but the problem is Jeet Kune Do is the art of self-expression. You're going to develop the individual, which exalts the ego, which means we have a lot more egotism in Jeet Kune Do. The reason that it hasn't got as well as it could be is, I think, by the nature of it, more people's egos are exalted, and therefore there could be a lot more humility. If there was more humility, really, I would chalk it up to that. And then for some personality types, I would definitely say that there are those they talk about the dark triad of personality traits, um, but people who are narcissistic, that kind of way of thinking isn't flexible. They aren't fluid. They're very black and white. Um, so occasionally you have those kind of personalities. So I would chalk it up to egotism, and sometimes people with what they refer to as the dark triad of personality traits.
Are are you are you able to observe people and read them, so to speak, um, in terms of what they may have gone through, and they don't even realize that in the way they move and the way they do things, that they are given evidence,
Yes.
right?
Yes. So,
Do you
I
have
was
fun? Do you have fun doing that with our Facebook colleagues? You can tell me. You can tell me.
I mean, observe and diagnose. I mean, sometimes telling somebody the truth doesn't help. It's yeah. Their mind's not open. But
Yeah.
well, no, I have been told I've been in I was part of a men's support group. I spoke to the San Diego Domestic Violence Council because I was part of a group for men that have survived domestic violence. One of the things that one of the facilitators that I worked with there mentioned or noticed is that I'm very intuitive, and sometimes I can read people and even answer their questions before they fully brought them out. Um, so I am
Well, I just experienced that.
really intuitive.
Yeah,
How so? Oh,
I did because now I forget, but what I said to you was I didn't even get to ask the question, and you were you know
yeah.
you were already answering it. I mean I like I said when we started, I don't have anywhere near the experience or the understanding that you have of this thing. And I think I am able, I call it scanning. I think I am able to scan people, right? Sometimes even through just what they write,
Mm.
you know, and see, okay, this guy obviously is coming from this standpoint because of whatever and whatever. I think it comes out even in the writing. So that's why I wondered if you did that type of stuff, and well, I don't know if there's any value to it. Um,
I mean, being able to read people gives you the opportunity to, if you're a conscientious person, a person with a good EQ, emotional intelligence, if I can read people, then I can tailor how I talk to them. Therefore, I can kind of regulate the situation. If I know somebody's toxic or explosive,
mhm.
um, I can, if I'm reading, some of those, what I mentioned, the dark triad of personality traits, which they talk about narcissism, sociopaths, and those kind of people who very much think of themselves and don't have a capacity to have empathy or compassion on others. If I'm reading this, I can cater the way I communicate in a way to de-escalate and calm them down. So
Yeah.
I do in general try to use, like, if I start reading those things, well, in interpersonal communication, in people I see face to face, I will say that when you mentioned the forum, maybe when communicating on forums where I'm not seeing somebody face to face, I may be a little more direct. Whereas in person, if I notice things, I'll try to de-escalate and get to I prefer a calm space to communicate in.
Mhm.
So if I see anything kind of going off, I'm gonna try to establish boundaries to the communication and try to I'm going to pay attention to the way I talk so that I don't inadvertently um, send somebody spiraling in the wrong direction. So
Right.
it's good to be able to read people, and if you do, just try to be mindful of how you interact with people. If you see people deal with the episodes, there's one guy I work with that well, I mean, I've different people. I've seen this happen where they have trauma, and I feel like I can read somebody who's going into a panic attack or PTSD, and in the middle of training, and I'll be like, "All right, let's stop, let's calm down, let's take some deep breaths,"
Mhm.
because like when you get into like a trauma mindset, sometimes you're not able to process the present information because there's too much going on in your brain. So I get people to just let's calm down, take some breaths. let's get our body. Like, how are you feeling in your body? You're feeling calm in your body. Let's take some breaths. Let's get into a calm space. So,
Yeah.
I do use it in my personal life, definitely to manage and maintain calm environments around me. Even as a bouncer or security guard, I mean, I'll read people and, I try to de-escalate situations because, the goal is de-escalation, not, having to deal with an altercation. So, but I mean, when you're a high threat environment, you have to read people, body language, and is somebody trying to sneak in a weapon, and, checking bulges and backpacks and stuff like that. So, when you're in a high threat environment, your awareness is more alert. So, um, it's good to be aware of others, and that's a sign of emotional intelligence, is being aware of others, and then being able to properly respond to it. Because people who have trauma or a personality disorder, they can't always respond to the people naturally because whatever trauma or whatever they're dealing with.
Yeah. How do you because I think sometimes, right, there are people who they don't want to appear to be soft, so they can't back down.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, so even if it's a Facebook exchange, it's like,
Mm.
nah, I'm not giving way. You gotta,
Yeah.
right? What is that about? Because in all honesty, I
Mm.
would like all the
Mm.
bickering to end.
Yeah. Oh,
I
I'm
don't
with you on that.
foresee it, right? I don't foresee it ending because it's
Mm.
bigger and older than all of us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't foresee it ending. But in the interim, right?
Yeah.
What is there a strategy for that?
Hmm.
Like what can I do to send a message to the bickerers that you might want to use a different approach?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking about like the tough guy syndrome. People who are fighters, whether it's MMA fighters or street fighters or bouncers, I mean, we have to project confidence in face of violence. So, like, MMA fighter, at the weigh-in, they got to act like a tough guy. They got to be a tough guy in the ring. People are street fighters. You got to be a tough guy. Um, you have to present that way, especially if like you're getting paid to do it. And then some people, as martial arts instructors, build their persona around that tough guy image.
Mhm.
And as a tough guy, it's Cobra Kai. Never retreat, never surrender. You don't back down, right? So I mean, in their mind, it would damage their brand, because if they show, and I don't want, I want to talk about this, is actually a good point. They don't want to show weakness. That's
Right.
actually a fallacy. It's a great fallacy, actually, because some of the most violent, like operators, Navy SEALs, who understand breath control and mindfulness, they understand they have to have things squared away with their family and be in a good mental space when they go to work. Because if they're distraught and they go into a conflict zone and their mind is in fight or flight syndrome, and they don't have breath control, they aren't calm, their life isn't in order, they're not going to operate on the level that they want to or need to, because they're going to be in fight or flight and they will make mistakes. So I will say it is a misnomer to believe that you have to project an image of toughness, because some of the most violent people understand mindfulness and good mental health, understand boundaries, and are the safest people with their family. Um, but some people, they bring that trauma into the home and then they aren't that in their home. So I would say that the tough guy image that we have, whether some people are, I mean, because I do film work, stunt choreography and stuff. Some people are actors and they have to project that on a screen. Some do it for their brand. Some do it as fighters. I mean, as a bouncer, I can't look soft when I'm bouncing.
Right.
But I've gotten tips, because at times I know I don't have to resort to violence. I'll get tips because I de-escalate a situation where a guy was acting a fool, and anybody, somebody else would have just smashed his face. And I'm like, yeah, this is pointless, dude. How about you save yourself that trouble, calm down, and save yourself the embarrassment. And I've gotten good tips actually off of de-escalating. So you have to have enough humility, but you have to understand that image is a created, manufactured image, and real tough guys don't have to always be tough. You can be soft.
Right.
It's the idea of I'd rather be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war. Yes, I want to be a warrior, but then, and this is why, in like the traditional Japanese martial arts, the samurai would have something soft like flower arranging to balance the violence. You want to have a peaceful pursuit that gives you grounding, because you can be the most dangerous person in the room, but you can also be the calmest. And there's this adage that sometimes, like, if you understand, it's not the guy that's in the club. It's not the guy in the face talking crap and peacocking. That's the most dangerous. It's the quiet guy in the corner that's just watching and just kind of relaxing. Like, if he knows how to handle himself and he's the calm guy, he's the guy you got to worry about. In different bouncing situations, there's definitely one where one of the people was getting violent, and I watched one of them move back and off, and I knew he was the one to watch, because the one that was acting out, like, I was like, all right, we got to watch you, and turns out that was a good idea. It's not always the person peacock. People who peacock and do this tough guy image, they're doing a show because they lack confidence. People who do that actually lack some confidence. If they were confident, they don't have to do that. Confidence doesn't require for me to present that way all the time. I can present humble and weak, but I know if I'm called on to act, I can do what I need to do. And so if you have true confidence, you're not a tough guy, but you can act like one when necessary. So how do you manage those egos on a forum? I don't know. I mean, these people need help outside of a forum. Like, I think the interactions on a forum aren't enough. We need interactions in a personal space that they personalize. Help them to personalize the people they're talking to. Sit them down in a room together and make them look in each other's eyes, look eye to eye. And
I'll invite them all down to a seminar in Miami. That's what I'll do.
And get them to sit around a table and talk to each other and be nice.
What I'll do.
Like, oh, hey, you're a cool guy. I actually like you. I mean,
right?
We can talk about, the Canelo fight, or, this or that or the other or something,
Interestingly enough, though, Jeremiah, so I haven't stick counted the amount of times that you've used the phrase, but I have a new saying. My new saying will be: control your breathing, speak softly, and carry a big stick.
There we go. Well, and that I love that saying. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Like, because I can be soft. I know what I can do, and I know that I've done a lot of training, wild training. Learning how to fight with handcuffs, zip ties, bags on my head. I've been through a lot of ridiculous scenario training, especially in a bunch of the Krav Maga stuff I've done.
Right.
There's not like a situation where I'm like, I don't know what to do for the most part. So, but when I have a skill set and I've trained this stuff, so like if something happens, I can do something. I'm not going to sit here looking doe-eyed, staring into the headlights or something. It's easy to be calm. But for people who haven't, I would suggest training. Breath control is like money in anything. It's the number one thing you should do in a fight. When somebody's escalating, take a nice deep breath, relax, and then get into flow state and, respond naturally, as Bruce Lee would say. But you don't have to have it pre-planned. When, you train the stuff and you get into that calm space, just react to what's in front of you.
Hey, let's wrap this up. I want to do something because I just opened up the comment stuff here, and
all right,
we got some interesting people that made some interesting. So I'll
all right.
You tell me if you can. Can you see that stuff that I put up?
Yeah, okay, I can see.
Okay, so then you just read it and then you just comment on it.
Okay. Stigmas also encourage people to suppress their problems, which eventually manifest into something psychologically ugly. Yes. Um, well, and that, encouraging people to be open about things is very important. And confronting the challenges in your life, because stigmas prevent you from openness. And I do want to. There's power in your story. There's power in a narrative. Once you learn what your story is and how to talk about it and tell people, it can become a empowering thing for other people. But when you don't know your narrative and you can't talk about it, then you have power. You haven't learned to access it yet.
Mhm.
Um, so removing the stigma means now I have the power of narrative to speak about it, and then once you speak, you feel strong and confident, and then you can use the trauma and the stuff that you've experienced to help educate people on how to manage things. Because really, and I want to go back to this. It was an answer to something earlier, and I forgot to say it, but look for people with scars. Don't look for people who say they walk on water. Look for the people with scars and follow them, because they got things to teach you. But when somebody pretends to be perfect, have it all together, do not listen. Go find somebody who's got scars, because they will be able to help you more than somebody just giving you theory. They have the experience and they can help you. So, yeah. Is there another one, or
Yeah. All right.
we can
So
keep going?
thanks for that, Aiden. Um, James Bishop said PTSD can absolutely be the result of smaller long-term abuse or trauma.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can be multiple events over a lifetime. Um, I mean, and for me, I experienced a lot of physical sexual violence growing up. So, I mean, there was a lot over long periods of time. But it can also be a one event, but it can be multiple little. And for fighters, every time you go in the ring, that's a little bit of TBI and a little bit of trauma. For street
Mhm.
fighters, every one of those fight is a trauma. As a bouncer, every one of those, I was in a altered state. I mean, when you're in fight or flight, you are in an altered state. Your body's producing adrenaline and dopamine and cortisol, and it's like your body's trying to give you drugs to fight and survive. It's trying to increase your state, so that you can function under pressure. Every time that happens, they're little traumas. So,
Right.
and that is why people that have experienced that are more alert. And as somebody who's experienced a lot, I've done a lot to learn and manage that. Not perfect, because I still struggle sometimes. I can't. Nobody walks on water. Everybody's got something.
Scars.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to move to the next one? Hold on.
Okay. Um,
I accidentally pulled the cord out.
okay. Was Aiden again. Martial arts can help with dealing with adversities as it helps to build our resilience.
Yeah. One, just the skill set gives confidence. And two, if I like to try to do a method of exposure therapy, but once they have the skill set and they're feeling comfortable, expose them to the very thing that they experience, so they know how to fight next time. So martial arts itself can be empowering. I like the idea of exposure therapy, getting people to, once they're comfortable and confident enough, in a sense, relive that and then fight through it this time. So next time they have the confidence to fight through it.
Hmm. Uh, James Bishop again. The magic is that if they feel they are more capable of protecting themselves, they feel they have more control of their life.
And thus more control of their emotions.
Mm.
When you feel more, because, and from my own experience, when growing up in the hood, there was a lot of gang violence. I mean, and I only had to walk like 2.5 blocks from my house to be in the wrong territory and be chased by a whole gang of people. One time I was chased by like 18 gang members with chains, bats, bikes, dude on a bicycle. I had to outrun a dude on a bicycle, and I ran for my life because I ain't fighting 18 people. I mean, I'm sorry. After 3 people, it's tough. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not doing well. 18, there's no way to survive that. There ain't no shame in running. But once I got to the point that I was confident in martial arts, I no longer felt like I had to respond to gang violence with violence. I felt like I could talk my way out and walk my way out. And one of my successful experiences of talking my way out, I was at Libby Lake in Oceanside, Deep Valley, Oceanside, and some Mesa locals, one of the local gang members, went to mug me at gunpoint. I had $360 in cash and brand new Nikes I had just bought on my feet. And he puts a gun to me and he's like, "Give me your money." I was doing Taekwondo. I think I was like recommended black belt just before black belt at that time. And I understood confidence and verbal de-escalation. And I was convinced that my wording it worked for me. But I was like, I had the money in my pocket, but I said, "I don't have anything for you." And he's like, "Give me your money." I was like, "I don't have anything for you." And he kept saying, I said, "I don't have anything for you." And eventually he started to walk away, but his two other friends were right there, and they both had knives, and they were kind of regrouping and talking. While they were talking, I made a beeline up the hill, hopped the fence, and ran, again for my life. But I still was able to use. I was confident and I was calm. Because I was confident and calm, I got myself to a situation that I got out and I didn't get shot, which was a real potential. But muggers don't always want to kill; they just want what you have.
Right.
So that's also something I learned, is that muggers, there's a difference between somebody who's coming just to kill you and somebody who really is using it as a prop to get you to do something. And that's also something I tell people when I'm teaching about gun defense is, you know, if a killer is going to kill, you need to act because they came just to kill. Muggers tend to use it as a prop, and with proper training in the proper situations, there are tactics you can use. But um, so yes, once you become more capable, then you have control of your emotions, and then you have control of your life, and therefore you don't have to resort to violence. So that is the beautiful, powerful thing, and that's why I say, like, it's a misnomer to say martial artists are more violent, because I
Right.
became less violent when I took up martial arts. I got in a lot of fights before I took up martial arts. I only got in 2 fights in high school after I took up martial arts, and both of them included me not throwing a single punch and defeating the guy. First one, the guy goes to hit me and I throw him into the wall. Second guy, the guy was bigger than me and he wanted revenge. He tried to pick a fight with me once before. He was smaller, and he lost. Well, he put on weight. He actually grew taller than me and stuff, and he wanted payback. Now he started the first fight. Like, it wasn't me, but it didn't end well for him. Well, now he wants payback, and so he's, "Oh, you know martial arts. I know martial arts." He was on the wrestling team. I just started on the wrestling team, and anyways, he goes to throw a punch, and I throw him into the fence. And then I see he's squaring up to kick me. I move in front of the stairs. He goes to kick me. I send him down the stairs. And he didn't have enough. It wasn't enough for him. End of PE, like, we do. That was the beginning. Coach is like, "Let's start." Da da da. End of PE, I'm sitting there leaned up on the wall at El Camino High School, the really rough corrugated wall behind me. And there's like 3 guys like, "Oh my gosh, you kicked his butt. It's so amazing." I'm like, and then all of a sudden I see him come over the guy's shoulder. I see this fist flying at my face. I move out the way. He punches the wall. But while his fist is sitting there, the coach is behind him. I see the coach grab his shoulder and pull him off. And he's like, "Man, why'd you move? I was just going to hit you." I'm like, "What?" Okay. So, yes, successfully, you can use martial arts to, you don't have to fight. So I didn't throw hands after I took martial arts. I wasn't kicking and punching people, at
Right.
least at school.
All
I'll
right.
leave that other.
Yeah, let's do one more.
All right.
Right. This is from Ryan Chafin. He says, "I miss the adrenaline rush from bouncing." I also
Bro.
used, so I also used to have horrible fight dreams where I'd wake up screaming and fighting.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
gosh. Yes. Yes. I do miss the adrenaline rush. I miss the threat environment. Um, yeah, I used to be super hyper vigilant. So bad I had a couple times I had like sleepovers with friends. Like, I don't know what it was, but somebody went to step over me and I was dead asleep. I woke up, grabbed the guy's leg. I went to this martial art conference once when I was doing Taekwondo, and I got to train with Grandmaster Pat Burleson. He was teaching jujitsu back in the early 90s. I guess he had done some European Vale Tudo fights, and he had done Wadu Ryu Jiu-Jitsu. And so it was like UFC around the start of the UFC, and he was teaching Mount and Juji Katami and Kimura and stuff like that. So it was a conference about that. But I was in a hotel room with another guy from my school, and I was laying down flat on my belly, and he taps me on my shoulder. And before I know it, I had rolled over and blocked and punched him in the belly. And before you know it, I got a sizable guy with good fight skills above me, full on ready to fight, because I just like full on. He lightly tapped me on the shoulder. So me just punching him in the belly was not the thing to do. It was like, and I'm like, oh shit. Sorry. I was just like, oh man. And, I wasn't aware, and I'm like trying to apologize, and he's like ready to pound me, and yeah. So I was hyper vigilance. You couldn't get close to me without me being fully aware and fully present. Even if I was asleep, I would wake up, and it was like,
Wow.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I also don't miss feeling like that. So not having those heightened anxiety attacks, I'm glad to have that stuff under control. I'm glad to not have nightmares waking up and stuff. Yeah, so it's important to deal with the trauma, to become a more peaceful person, to become that warrior in the garden. Breath control, diet, exercise, socializing, journaling, listening to music, having good habits to outlets for the stress and talk. There's a lot can be said for talk therapy. Talk therapy is good. Even if you just have a good friend that listen to you and let you talk, sometimes like all that some people need is to unwind from their traumas, just to talk about it. That's why, counselors get paid all this money. You don't have to pay a counselor. You just need somebody to listen. I mean, if you don't have access to that, then find you a friend that you can that'll let you talk about it. Somebody supportive, not somebody who's going to try to solve your problems or be judgmental, but something could be said about, talk therapy. If you have severe panic anxiety attacks and you can't control it, then you should be on medication until you can control it. So, I mean, having good management principles is pretty key, but martial arts is in general very beneficial for people with, mental health issues and people who've experienced trauma. And I feel like one of our greatest things is that we get to help people find confidence in their life, feel good, do an exercise they love, make it interesting. If you see Paul McCarthy's TED Talk on cognitive Kali, the cognitive benefits of doing Kali. I like to do the complicated Sinawali stuff. I always encourage my students to practice this long term because it's been proven to help people fight Alzheimer's, increase memory retention, fight memory loss. And it's it's just really good. Bilateral motion causes both hemispheres to fire. It's really good for your brain. It can, at first you get a little brain fog because you're doing a lot with your brain, the bilateral motion and stuff, but it's really good. I love to neurally overload my students, and they love it when I start to get complicated, and they're like, okay, it's good for the brain. I'm like, we're going into neuro overload. We're going to do a whole bunch of complicated stuff now. And they're like, yeah, let's go, so.
That's fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Jeremiah, thanks so much, man. This has been boss. There's so much actionable stuff that you gave out. I think people are really, really going to benefit from this. I'm glad we took the time to do it.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for, is to talk about it, deal with things that are beneficial, deal with things that are challenging, and provide resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for having me on and doing this. Really appreciate that. And
sure thing, man. Now, people know that they can find you on Facebook. There's two profiles. I guess.
Go to my main one, the one that's active. I created a backup one in case, I got locked out of an earlier account.
Oh, okay.
So I keep a backup one in case, like, I don't know, something strange
All right.
happens.
Okay. Well, you guys can, and then is your website up? CaliCombatSystems.com. Is that up?
CaliCombatSystems.wixsite.com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Cali Combat System, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. If you look up Cali Combat System, Cali as in short for California,
As in,
not a
right,
weird,
as in
not
CALI.
not a weird spelling of Cali. I had somebody ask me, and I was like, I've never seen Cali spelled like that. Neither have I. It's California. I live in Southern Cali. Cali Combat System. A guy in Cali teaches multiple combat systems. One of them is Kali, but don't confuse the name with Kali. You know,
Right.
I teach other things also, but yeah.
All right, man. All right. Well,
So,
thanks again, man.
yeah. All right. Have a good one.
All right. Okay. You take care.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I agree, Aiden. Totally refreshing and goes well beyond the eye poke and who's who. Yes. All right. So that was episode 301. You guys know the deal. Go through anything that you need to comment on. I'll ask Jeremiah to take a look at it and respond to it. Want to remind you, wouldn't it be fun if all those warring parties on Facebook would all come down to Miami next February and meet each other face to face, like Jeremiah suggested at Titans of JKD 4, right? Yeah, I know, entirely self-serving, right? You can support me and the program over at jkdrebel.com. Click on the Rebel Gear link, and that's where you'll see T-shirts and coffee mugs and hoodies and all that stuff. Also at paypal.me/unifiedma Miami, paypal.me/unifiedma Miami. The Jeet Kune Do Journey Volume 1, raw but edited edition is available. paypal.me/unifiedma Miami. You can support the JKD Dialogues by becoming a monthly subscriber. Just click on the join link. This is over on the YouTube channel. Just click join, and that's where you'll see the different levels of membership. And that is it for today, my friends. I'm on the road again next weekend. Ron Reagan and I and Anthony are going out to where are we going? To Denver. We're going to go see Fudan over in Denver. So since I'm on the road, there won't be anything. But then we'll be back. In the works on the 24th. All right. So until then, the next episode. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, signing off. I want to say again, I really, really enjoyed talking with Jeremiah about this stuff. This was, I dare say, this is one of the best episodes of the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues that we've done since we've been on. All right. So, all right. You guys enjoy your weekend. Take care. Be safe. Talk soon.